I think failure is bad. I don't think it's good. But if something's important enough, then you do it even though the risk of failure is high. And so I think my advice if somebody wants to start a company is they should bear in mind that the most likely outcome is that it's not going to work. And they should reconcile themselves to that strong possibility. And they should only do it if they feel that they are really compelled to do it. You know,
Right.
Because it's gonna the way starting a company works is like usually in the beginning the very beginning it's kind of fun, and then it's really hellish for a number of years.
You talked about chewing glass.
Yeah, there's a friend of mine who's a successful entrepreneur, and started actually his career around the same time as I did, and he has a good phrase. His name's Bill Lee. He said, "Yeah, starting a company is like eating glass and staring into the abyss," and
you agree with that?
Generally true. Yeah. And if you don't eat the glass, you're not going to be successful. The companies that I've started, I wanted to have a significant effect on the future of the world, or try to at least. And so it wasn't really from the perspective of figuring out what is the easiest way to make money, because that would have certainly ruled out rockets and electric cars. But it was really from the standpoint of what do I think are the important problems that have to be solved in order for humanity to have a bright future, and and certainly sustainable energy, both production and consumption, as well as space exploration, and ultimately getting out there and exploring the stars. I think those are two major ones. I think the biggest problem that humanity faces in the 21st century is sustainable energy, terrestrially, and then the biggest problem of the sort of millennia is the extension of life beyond Earth. So I want to try to do as much as I can in that regard, even if it's not the easiest way to make money. For somebody who's just starting out as an entrepreneur, I think the internet is a great place to start. Because if you're just starting out, unless you've got a ton of capital that somebody gave you or you inherited or something, you have to start a company that requires a small amount of capital, where it's heavily weighted towards the intellectual capital in your head. So I think anything to do with sort of software and with the internet is a really good starting point. It would have been impossible for me to have done electric cars or rockets, right from the start, because those require money to get anything done.
Could you talk a little bit more about your vision for the future in the next maybe 20 and 50 years, what you see the world looking like then?
Well, on the energy side, I think by the midpoint of the century, I think solar power will be the single largest source of electricity. It may not be a majority, but it will be the single largest source in the combination of photovoltaic and solar thermal. And I think in about 20 years, a majority of all new cars manufactured will be purely electric. And 20 years after that, the installed base will have flipped over to the point where the vast majority of the cars on the road are purely electric. Because the installed base of cars turns over about every 12 to 15 years. So I think that's a pretty positive thing that will occur, which is going to require an enormous amount of work and investment and everything. But that's where I think things will end up. I think certainly being focused on something that you're confident will have high value to someone else, and just being really rigorous in making that assessment, because people tend to, a natural human tendency is wishful thinking. So a challenge for entrepreneurs is to say, well, what's the difference between really believing in your ideals and sticking to them versus pursuing some unrealistic dream that doesn't actually have merit? and that is a really difficult thing to tell. Can you tell the difference between those two things?
Right.
You know? So you need to be sort of very rigorous in your self-analysis. I think certainly extremely tenacious, and then just work like hell. I mean, you just have to put in, 80 to 100-hour weeks every week.
Right.
I mean, if other people are putting in 40-hour work weeks and you're putting in 100-hour work weeks, then even if you're doing the same thing, you know that in 1 year you will achieve what they achieve. You will achieve in 4 months what it takes them a year to achieve.
The biggest mistake in general that I've made, and I'm trying to correct for that, is to put too much of a weighting on somebody's talent and not enough on their personality. And I've made that mistake several times. In fact, then I would say, oh, gee, I'm not going to make that mistake again. Then I would make it again. And I think it actually matters whether somebody has a good heart. It really does. And I've made the mistake of thinking that sometimes it's just about the brain.
It's very important to like the people you work with. Otherwise, life, your job is going to be quite miserable. And in fact, we have a strict no assholes policy at SpaceX, and we fire people if they're. I mean, we give them a little bit of warning, but if they continue to be an asshole, then they're fired.
And in 3 years, there will be a cheaper one. Tell me about that.
That will be a smaller car. It'll be 20% smaller, about half the price, not as many features. So if you think of like the Model S as similar to an Audi A7, A8 type of thing, then our third generation car would be more like an Audi A4.
A4, right. But still not for a very large public, because it's still an expensive car.
Yeah, we're talking about, in dollar terms, about $35,000 for the car. And that would be, but when you consider that relative to a gasoline car, because you save a lot more on gasoline, it's more like a $25,000 gasoline car. So that's what we're planning, but that's about 3 years out.
But you think the average Joe will buy that car already, or must it wait for another generation of Teslas?
I think that, yeah, the sweet spot in the market generally is around the mid-20s in US dollar terms. So it's maybe, if it's equivalent to buying a gasoline car at $25,000, it's the mainstream of the market. Yeah. But there's probably still another level to go to make it affordable to all.
All right.
But I mean, our goal is to try to make mass market affordable cars. That's been our goal from the beginning. So a lot of people wonder, well, why doesn't Tesla just make a mass market long range electric car right now? And the issue is that it takes time to refine the technology. It takes time to scale up production. So you need economies of scale. You need a major design iteration. And also the third generation car will be 20% smaller.
Yeah.
So that's essentially how we get to a 50% price reduction. 20% size decrease, factor of 10 production increase, and another design iteration to design for manufacturing.
And that takes time, obviously.
It does. But I think anyone who buys the Model S can take comfort, and I think something that's very important, which is they're helping pay for the mass market car. So all the money we get from the Model S and the X, we pour into development of the third generation car. And I think
you don't make a dime of it.
Well, we don't issue dividends
No.
Or have big bonuses or anything. My salary is $1 a year.
Yeah.
I mean, but our goal from the beginning has been to make a compelling mass market car, because that's what's needed for the world.
Yeah. But you keep comparing this car, the Tesla, with Audis and everything. Will it be comparable with the Nissan eventually as well?
Well, I don't know about Nissan.
Okay.
That's probably I wouldn't aim. That's not a target I'd aim for. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is that if you do buy, let's say you buy sort of a Porsche or a Ferrari or something like that, you're not helping. Ferrari's not going to take the money they make and then ultimately make mass market cars. They're not going to help change the world in a positive way. What we're trying to do is change the world in a positive way. So I think if somebody buys this car, they can feel like, okay, they made a small difference.
It almost feels like charity you do.
I wouldn't say it's like charity, but there's a greater good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do think there's some pretty significant breakthroughs. I mean, in genomics, we're getting better and better at decoding genomes and being able to write genetics. I think that's going to be a huge area. I think there's likely to be some breakthroughs in artificial intelligence. I suspect we will even see the flying car.
All right. Is that going to be an Elon Musk production?
No.
You're going to let someone else do that?
Yeah. I think someone else is doing that.
So I understand at that time you were heavily into comics. I'm curious to know, did you love Iron Man? The comic Iron Man?
I did kind of like Iron Man, yeah.
You did?
Yeah,
did you ever imagine that you would be the inspiration for the movie version?
I did not.
Yes.
No, that was pretty much. I would say 0%. I would have said 0% chance.
What kind of kid were you? I mean, can you look back and see yourself? Were you a bit of a loner kid, bookish kid?
I wasn't all that much of a loner. At least not willingly. But I certainly was quite. I was very bookish. I was reading all the time. So I was either reading, working on my computer, reading comics, playing Dungeons and Dragons, that kind of thing.
And I understand Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, that wonderful book by Douglas Adams. That was a key book for you. What was it about that book that fired your imagination?
So I guess when I was in around 12 or 13, I had kind of an existential crisis, and I was reading various books on trying to figure out the meaning of life and, well, like, what does it all mean? Because it starts seeming quite meaningless, and then we happen to have like some books by Nietzsche and Schopenhauer in the house, which you should not read at age 14. It's bad. It's really negative. But then I read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and it was like quite positive, I think, and it sort of highlighted an important point, which is that a lot of times the question is harder than the answer, and if you can properly phrase the question, then the answer is the easy part. And so, if to the degree that we can better understand the universe, then we better know what questions to ask, and then whatever the question is that most approximates what's the meaning of life, that's the question we could ultimately get closer to understanding. And so I thought, well, to the degree that we can expand the scope and scale of consciousness and knowledge, human knowledge, then that would be a good thing.
Wow, so you were having these deep thoughts at what age, 10, 14?
Yeah, sort of in the puberty, I guess. I was 13, so 13 through 15, probably the most traumatic years.